Protests, both for and against Donald Trump in the U.S., are continuing to divide the country. As Gayane Chichikam now reports, there is a dangerous trend developing, with some of the demonstrators against the president going to the events armed.
To see Trump supporters with guns at rallies in states where they're allowed to open carry is not surprising to many, considering these Trump supporters are likely conservative gun rights advocates. But this weekend, something more unusual happened. Trump protesters in Arizona showed up armed to the teeth with semi-automatic rifles. They call themselves the Phoenix John Brown Gun Club. They claim to be for the rights of working people and the poor, who they believe are being cheated by Trump and other politicians. A journalist with the Phoenix New Times, Stephen Lemons, who witnessed the armed group's demonstration, said the left-wing militia seemed just as intimidating to him as the right-wing one. The journalist says the armed protesters demanded that he stop filming and leave.
Business card?
I do. Who am I giving it to?
Can I see your business card, please?
No.
We reached out to the Phoenix John Brown Gun Club. We've yet to receive a response. If people think anti-Trump folks are also against guns, the demonstration in Arizona this weekend showed that is not always the case. Does it surprise anybody?
Do you think this is a pro-Trump or anti-Trump rally?
Pro-Trump.
Anti.
Really?
Yep. In Arizona this weekend.
Really?
Yeah.
I'm shocked.
I'm going to say anti.
You're right.
Yeah.
Be for Trump.
Anti.
Actually, anti.
They look like anti-Trump protesters.
That is correct.
I'd say maybe pro.
Anti.
They are anti.
These days, when Trump supporters get together, protesters often rally to confront them. The meetings often result in scuffles and shouting matches, with expletives flying in both directions. In this charged political environment, if both camps start showing up with guns, bloodshed could become a real possibility.
According to a recent profile by BuzzFeed, activist Nisrin Elliman and dozens of other protesters will be hosting a 24-hour City of Refuge rally outside the Trump building on Wall Street this Tuesday. The protest targets the president's attempts to block refugees, threaten sanctuary cities, and cut humanitarian aid. The organization planning the event, African Communities Together, or ACT, advocates for and assists African immigrant communities. A Stanford PhD student and legal green card holder from Sudan, Elliman was one of several hundred people held in limbo after Trump issued his first executive order banning travel from Muslim-majority countries. In the article, Elliman recalls the palpable tension as officers told her and several others that they would be sent back from where they came. I was let go, but I was concerned about all these people who were being sent back to these dangerous places, adding, "We need to keep reminding people that for many refugees, this is life or death."
Polarizing views continue to dominate the debate over climate change in the U.S. Now scientists are turning to technology to counter global warming. Harvard researchers are launching the world's biggest solar geoengineering study aimed at deliberately altering the planet's temperature. RT's Marina Portnaya brings us the details.
Countless scientists have described climate change as the greatest environmental threat our planet has ever faced. While solar panels and capping greenhouse emissions are two solutions for countering global warming, scientists are testing out a riskier technique known as solar radiation management. Harvard scientists are preparing small-scale atmospheric experiments to establish whether geoengineering can successfully halt climate change. Researchers believe that spraying certain types of particles into the stratosphere could help reflect more heat back into space. Researchers say large volcanic eruptions in the past have blasted tens of millions of tons of sulfur dioxide into the sky, causing the atmosphere to cool. Now, scientists say they'll test out their theory by launching a high-altitude balloon tethered to a gondola equipped with propellers and sensors. The geoengineering test will be carried out sometime next year with water particles. Subsequent experiments would include seeding the sky with sulfur dioxide, alumina, or calcium carbonate. Geoengineering advocates believe the planet could be covered with a solar shield for as little as $10 billion a year. But they stress a solar tech fix should be viewed as a complement, not substitute, for aggressively reducing emissions. Some critics view solar engineering with alarm, fearing the potential for unintended consequences. Even Harvard researchers acknowledge risks associated with natural alterations to the Earth's radiation balance, such as potentially depleting the ozone and changing the temperature of the stratosphere. But supporters insist that solar geoengineering should be researched because the alternative would be allowing climate change to proceed without a plan B. Now, as climate scientists underscore a growing sense of urgency, America's new leader is moving in the opposite direction. This week, President Donald Trump is expected to sign an executive order reportedly rolling back limits on greenhouse gas emissions from power plants, as well as scrapping federal guidelines instructing agencies to factor climate change into policy making.
A manhunt is underway for the gunman responsible for an ambush-style attack overnight on 2 Florida police officers. Fellow Miami-Dade officers used a pickup truck to rush their wounded colleagues to the hospital. Bullet holes could be seen in the car where the plainclothes officers were sitting at the time of the attack. Noel Bojorquez is outside Jackson Memorial Hospital Trauma Center in Miami, where the officers are being treated. Noel, good morning.
Good morning. As you mentioned, those officers were rushed to this hospital in the back of a pickup truck. This is where they were dropped off, and with some help, they were actually able to walk through those hospital doors. The director of the Miami-Dade Police Department says the attack on his officers was unprovoked.
We have 2 officers shot. We have 2 officers shot.
This video, shot from outside the hospital, shows a black Ford pickup truck racing toward the emergency room, with the 2 injured Miami-Dade police officers in the bed. The undercover officers, who were operating as part of the Homicide Task Force's gang unit, were conducting surveillance inside an unmarked car in a notoriously gang-ridden area when officials say they were targeted.
The end result of that, their operation was that they were apparently shot in an ambush-style attack.
One of the Miami-Dade officers was able to return fire, but authorities are not confident the suspected attacker was hit.
It's certainly trying moments for us all. We got lucky tonight that the officers will survive.
Police have yet to make any arrests. But last night, the director of the Miami-Dade Police Department pleaded with the community for help in identifying the shooter.
We need you now to step up to the plate. These are the people that are causing that havoc in our community, and we're not going to stop. This isn't going to deter us from doing our jobs. This is going to ignite a bigger fire within us to protect our citizens.
The officers' injuries are not life-threatening. Police say it's unclear whether the suspects knew they were targeting police. Either way, they are clearly dangerous, and right now, officers are still searching the area where the shooting happened.
The fatal shooting of a Chinese man by police at his home has sparked violent protests in Paris. More than 100 people from the capital's large Chinese community confronted riot police. An investigation has been opened by French police into the circumstances of the shooting, and China has summoned a French diplomat to its embassy in Paris over the incident. We will continue to follow the development of this case with our embassy in France and ensure the safety and interests of Chinese citizens. Meanwhile, we hope that Chinese nationals can express their wishes and demands in a reasonable and lawful way. Police say the Chinese man was trying to attack an officer when he was shot dead in his home. The incident comes after the Chinese community in Paris protested last year over claims of police brutality.
Today, the White House condemned the mass arrests in Moscow during rallies against Vladimir Putin's government. The protests were organized by one of Putin's fiercest political opponents. And Elizabeth Palmer is following this.
United in anger, Russians from across the country marched to protest against official corruption. In Moscow, it was the biggest demonstration since the anti-Kremlin rallies of 2012. But without a permit, authorities called the gathering illegal, and soon the police had moved in. Hundreds were arrested, including Alexei Navalny, an opposition leader and ferocious critic of President Putin and his famously corrupt administration. Earlier this month, Navalny released a video alleging that Russia's prime minister had amassed a fortune in mansions, yachts, and vineyards, all through corrupt deals. The video went viral. And here's the reaction. The protesters' message to the government: shame on you. Navalny's now an opposition icon. After his arrest, supporters surrounded the police van, shouting, "Don't let them through." And police were forced to lift cars left as obstacles out of the way. Navalny appeared in court today and was handed a fine and a short jail sentence. Scott, these arrests have raised eyebrows in Washington. They're seen as more heavy-handed stifling of any opposition to President Putin. But Alexei Navalny's not going anywhere. In fact, he says he's going to run against Mr. Putin next year for the presidency.
Time for Focus, and today we have a report on the construction of a bridge between Russia and Crimea. It's been 3 years since Moscow annexed the peninsula from Ukraine, and the only way of keeping Crimea supplied is by sea or air. That means higher prices, Moscow insisting that will change once the bridge is completed. Elena Voloshin and Thomas Lowe report.
The Kerch Strait, where 30 or so journalists have been invited by the Crimea Bridge Press Service to see how the construction work is coming along.
The bridge is being built to schedule. As it stands today, 267 pillars have been put in place.
Work here in the Black Sea Basin is carried out 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. By the end of 2018, 4 car lanes and in 2019, 2 railway lines are expected to open between Russia and Crimea. They're 19 kilometres long and cost the equivalent of €3,700,000,000. A massive project of great importance to Vladimir Putin. So the teams working on the bridge aren't skimping on getting their message across.
Это на века. Это моя дорога домой.
Это моя страна. Мы строим мост.
In the meantime, the connection between Russia and Crimea is made by ferry for passengers, merchandise, as well as armoured cars and military convoys that they try to stop us from filming.
Let's not film the armoured cars.
Why not?
It's military equipment. You need authorization to film it.
Those living in Crimea hope for just one thing, that the prices go down. Everything on the peninsula costs at least 20% more than in Russia.
Here a can of peas costs 56 rubles. In shops in the Krasnodar region, the same can would cost between 35 and 40 rubles.
A large number of trucks travel from the Krasnodar region to deliver goods to Crimea.
It's not a large distance between here and the Krasnodar region, no more than 300 to 400 kilometers, but delivery costs the same as if a truck had to cross the whole of Russia.
That's because of uncertainty about the ferry journey.
The biggest problem in winter are the storms. The ferries stop running and our shelves are empty. In summer there's a flood of tourists and the trucks carrying merchandise aren't prioritized. Then there's the Russian suppliers. Quite a few don't want to deliver to Crimea, and particularly not perishable goods, because the risk their merchandise won't get to us is too big.
Nikolai is promising to reduce his prices thanks to the bridge.
Will it stand or will it collapse? The answer could mean life or death for those living near the Tabqa Dam, and primarily for the hundreds of thousands in the city of Raqqa. The dam is on the front line in the battle to capture Raqqa, which has served as Daesh's self-declared capital in Syria. On one side of the dam, Daesh still has control, but on the other, the SDF, backed by the United States, has gained a foothold. The dam's figures reveal what's at stake. It's 60 meters tall and stretches for 4.5 kilometers, the largest in Syria. Its collapse would be a humanitarian disaster.
The US-led coalition is carrying airstrikes on Daesh, and the civilians are leaving seeking safety.
Daesh released these pictures of the dam's control room. They say that coalition airstrikes have locked the dam's gates, trapping water behind them. The coalition released its own aerial photos and says it's taking measures to ensure that the dam doesn't collapse. But it is an important, strategic target. The Americans say in the past it has been used as a prison and training location by Daesh. A major breach of the dam would cause further devastation in an area already suffering the effects of Daesh rule and daily airstrikes.
قصفتنا الطيارة وأهلي ماتوا 15 واحد. هاكلها من قبل الدواعش. الله ينتقم من الدواعش.
كل واحد طار بديره، كل واحد صار. ابني وقع، قال له الجندي، قال له بس انقذه، قال له ما منه چارة يعني راح.
نطلع احنا ما خلونا، قالوا ظلوا هنا. قال ابد مقتولين، انتم مقتولين كلكم.
Recreational marijuana might be legal in Canada as early as next year. An anonymous government official told CBC about plans to introduce a new bill in early April that would legalize marijuana. The idea is a mix of federal and provincial control. While the federal government would have licensing power over marijuana producers, provincial governments would oversee distribution and pricing. No one younger than 18 could buy it, but provinces could raise that age requirement. One of Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's most controversial campaign promises was to legalize recreational use. But marijuana advocates have said they've felt cheated, claiming Trudeau's administration has been stricter than previous conservative ones. Police raided several dispensaries across the country earlier in March. CBC reports the new legislation would go live July 1st, 2018. It would need to pass Canada's House of Commons and Senate before becoming law. As of Tuesday morning, federal officials hadn't said anything about the CBC story.
New Zealand's first transgender woman to compete at the Australian International Weightlifting Competition pulled off a dominating performance at this year's event, but some of her competitors are saying she had an unfair advantage. The New Zealand Herald says 39-year-old Laurel Hubbard set 4 unofficial national records at the event on March 19th. The second-place finisher lifted about 19 kilograms, or 41 pounds, less than her. Hubbard was born as a male and was a competitive weightlifter before transitioning to a female in her mid-30s. One competitor told New Zealand's One News Now, quote, "We all deserve to be on an even playing field. It's difficult when you believe that you're not." Others have also publicly questioned if it's fair for Hubbard to compete as a woman. Hubbard passed all necessary qualifications to compete in the event as a female, which includes a testosterone test.
The long-delayed Keystone XL pipeline is one step closer to reality after President Trump issued a permit to break ground.
TransCanada will finally be allowed to complete this long-overdue project with efficiency and with speed.
Friday's permit caps a year-long fight between environmental groups and energy industry advocates. But the battle could continue away from the White House and along the route. Oil will travel through 5 states. It is there that Native American tribes and even local landowners will continue to oppose the pipeline. The $8 billion project would carry oil from Canada to refineries along the Texas Gulf Coast. Some 800,000 barrels worth will travel through Montana, South Dakota, Nebraska, Kansas, and Oklahoma. If you do the math, that's roughly 1/5 of the oil Canada exports to the U.S.
This announcement is part of a new era of American energy policy that will lower costs for American families and very significantly reduce our dependence on foreign oil and create thousands of jobs right here in America. And I also would like to add, I think it's a lot safer to have pipelines than to use other forms of transportation.
Industry advocates say the pipeline would improve U.S. energy security and create new jobs.
This project will directly generate an estimated 16,100 jobs, according to the State Department, all without spending a dime of taxpayer money.
But opponents claim it would add to global warming and that the country needs cleaner sources of energy.
So the bottom line, Keystone finished. They're going to start construction when?
We got some work to do in Nebraska to get our permits there. So
Nebraska.
We're looking forward to working through
I'll call
that.
Nebraska.
According to the Georgia Department of Agriculture, the state of Georgia has confirmed its first ever case of bird flu in commercial poultry. This means the outbreak of the disease is present in the United States' biggest chicken meat producing state. A flock of 18,000 chickens used for breeding have been slaughtered after testing positive for H7 bird flu. The Department of Agriculture says the birds were likely infected with a form of the virus that is not highly lethal because the flock did not show signs of illness. The discovery came after officials in Alabama, Kentucky, and Tennessee confirmed cases of bird flu in breeding operations this month. U.S. lawmakers and food safety advocates are pressuring the federal government to join other nations blocking shipments of raw beef from Brazil in the face of a scandal in that country's meatpacking sector. The United States has already started testing all beef from Brazil for pathogens. Farm organizations argue stronger action is needed to protect the food supply, with consumers less able to choose the meat they buy following the end of U.S. laws requiring that beef be labeled to show its origin. Their push to halt Brazilian imports could also boost domestic sales. A slew of major meat buyers suspended imports after Brazilian federal police on March 17th unveiled an investigation into alleged payments to government health officials by meat processing companies to forego inspections and cover up health violations.
A destructive storm carrying winds of more than 260 kilometres per hour has made landfall on Australia's northeast coast. Cyclone Debbie has been upgraded to a Category 4. That's just one rung below the most dangerous wind speed level. But forecasters say it could rise to level 5 as it moves inland.
I think there's still worse to come, to be honest. As it comes around and goes northerly, I think we're going to cop more of it.
The state of Queensland is set to bear the brunt. Some 30,000 people have been evacuated ahead of Cyclone Debbie. The authorities have stockpiled food and fuel and put the army on standby. However, as winds cut power to about 23,000 people, emergency response crews hunkered down waiting for the storm to blow over. The slow-moving cyclone, which is expected to be Queensland's most damaging since 2011, is likely to remain over the state for hours.
Parts of the central United States are bracing for more severe weather following a string of violent thunderstorms. A camera captured hail yesterday cracking a car window. The powerful storm hammered parts of North Texas and Oklahoma. In some places, people reported hail larger than baseballs. Radar shows the storm sweeping across the southern plains. David Begnaud is near Dallas in Highland Village, Texas. David, good morning.
Good morning. Look at this windshield. There are dents all over this vehicle, some that are deep enough to hold water. You know, a lot is made about tornadoes being so severe, right? They can be deadly, but a lot of times tornadoes can hit and miss in an area, might affect a couple dozen people, and they're quick. This hailstorm lasted in some areas up to 10 minutes. And what you had was hail that was forming at 40 to 50,000 feet, higher than a commercial airliner flies, and raining down at 100 miles per hour. That's how you get this.
Hail pounded the southern plains Sunday, crashing down on homes and vehicles, eventually turning entire neighborhoods white. On the roads, car windshields were no match against the large hailstones that fell in some places faster than 100 miles per hour. Drivers crowded gas stations trying to protect their vehicles from the storm and dangerous road conditions. Even homes were vulnerable as hail punched through skylights.
You could hear it coming from the distance, just like a stampede, and all of a sudden it just loud thuds hitting our skylight.
Hail smashed the skylight at this Walmart, forcing the store to close for several hours after rain flooded the floor inside. On social media, people showed off the size of the hailstones, comparing some to baseballs. Hail was not the only threat, though. 2 tornadoes were reported in Texas and Oklahoma. The damage, though, was minor.
The good news, no injuries or deaths reported. But this is expensive. I mean, costly. In fact, last year, Texas had one of the most expensive hailstorms ever. It was in the San Antonio area. You know the price tag? About $1.2 billion.
A magnitude 5.1 earthquake has led to widespread damage in southwest China's Yunnan province on Monday, affecting over 15,000 people. 1 person was injured and damage was reported in 8 townships in the Yangbi County. Homes collapsed and there are reports of cracks on walls. Schools, dams, and water facilities were also affected. The quake has led to an estimated loss of 200 million yuan or $29 million in the area. Rescue teams made up of firemen, police officers, and disaster relief personnel have been dispatched. The first batch of tents, quilts, overcoats, food, and other relief goods is on its way to the area.
Beijing has become the latest to donate millions of dollars in aid to Peru as the South American country continues to struggle with its worst flooding in decades. More than 90 people have been killed and 120,000 displaced in rain-related incidents since December. Many of those hardest hit are the poor who've built their homes on affordable land near rivers which have burst their banks following weeks of torrential rain. In the capital Lima, where a third of Peruvians live, running water has been restricted after treatment plants were clogged with debris from mudslides.
In a makeshift camp by a disused airfield, Nima Mohammed is boiling a kettle of black tea. This is all she has to feed herself and her 6 children, and it'll be their only meal of the day. They're living in Somaliland, a breakaway region from Somalia. Mohammed is one of 2 million people living here. Around half of them face starvation. Struck by acute drought, they've lost almost all their livestock. I came here with 250 goats. All of them are dead except 2. I have 7 children who I'm struggling to feed, and I'm forced to give them this black tea without milk as all the animals I used to milk are dead. Beyond Somaliland, other regions of Somalia also face the devastating effects of drought. Decimated harvests threaten to tip into full-blown famine. In areas occupied by Al-Shabaab Islamist militants, shortages are worsened by fighting. In other places, disease spreading among elderly and children.
It's aware of its own mission, activates itself at a predetermined time, maps the skies for the best route to its target destination, and is capable of swapping payload and batteries in mid-air. Optimus is being called the world's first fully automated drone that doesn't need human supervision. And if it reminds a few people of self-aware robots in Hollywood films, then yes, the similarities are a bit uncanny. Its innovators hope that the drone will serve multiple purposes.
The future has so many possibilities using this specific thing, if you think about it. Flying in cities for emergency response situations or applications, and being able to take off from one station and landing in another. So that extends the range dramatically.
Optimus is also capable of intelligently choosing the path of least air resistance. But some people warn the airspace over cities needs to be better regulated before it's safe to fly these drones. In recent years, private drones have proliferated in urban airspace worldwide, raising the question, who owns the air above cities? And with Daesh modifying drones to fire missiles in Iraq, security analysts are concerned about similar attacks elsewhere. But Aerobotics, the Israeli company behind the Optimus drone, says its technology is safe and will be used mostly for industrial purposes and emergencies. The hope is that an autonomous drone that can chart its own course will be free of any limitations that a regular manned drone has.
Elon Musk is planning another startup straight out of a science fiction novel. Called Neuralink, it will work to augment the human brain with computers. It is reported to be finding a way to surgically merge software with the brain using an implant. Neuralink aims to improve memory and even create a mind-controlled digital interface for computers. Though the startup is new, Musk's opinions on biological intelligence are not. It is long known that he prefers for a biological intelligence to develop along with, not grow dependent on, digital intelligence.